Hey everyone, today we're going to be doing another Comicstorian Explains the Insanity of the World of Comic Books to you. And we're going to talk about one of my favorite superheroes this time, Red Hood. Like, he's such a favorite, I have the Red Hood version of a bat symbol right here. Tattooed. It's tattooed to me forever. This will be, oh man, that's sad. All right, anyway, now that I just let out a good cry, because half of you are going to tell me how I ruined my entire arm, we're going to talk about today's sponsor, Gamer Subs. Use the code COMICS at checkout if you enjoy these types of videos, and get yourself an energy drink, which is powder-based and a little less chunky than its competitors, but you can also get these awesome waifu shaker cups, and you can get them on t-shirts and such. If you like these types of videos, they are supporting the growth of them, and you can support us and them by using the code COMICS at checkout. All right, let's get into the Red Hood. So anyway, in order to understand the situation with the Red Hood, we have to start with the concepts of Jason Todd. Now, to start with Red Hood, we got to start when he was introduced. Back around 1983 timeframe, early from what I can read here, Jason Todd was introduced as a replacement for Dick Grayson. Dick Grayson was moving on. He was a part of the Teen Titans, and he was kind of making his own identity. So DC thought it would be fun to progress the universe of the DC comic book landscape. They introduced Jason Todd, who, depending on the version of the origin you're reading, was stealing the tires off of the Batmobile. Regardless of how they've changed it around to match each iteration of Red Hood, that version seemingly kind of remains. He was stealing the tires off of the Batmobile and then brought to Ma Gunn or brought to Leslie Thompson or brought to somebody else, which eventually led to him staying with Bruce Wayne and becoming the new Robin. But he was kind of an edgier, like more aggressive Robin. Like we've heard, he's not nearly as bad as everything portrays them because it's a 5-year span of time before he dies. In that span of time, he's actually a pretty effective Robin. He just has kind of a vicious streak that pops out once in a while. Now, in all of the retellings, they like to pretty much amp that up. They tell you that Jason Todd was the murderous Robin and he was so evil and he didn't get it. No, he actually did quite a few good things. But due to the fact that nobody wanted Dick Grayson to be replaced, he kind of got a lot of flack. There were people who just weren't fans of Jason Todd, and DC heard these outcries. Now, this is before the internet. This is the 80s. So they heard their outcries through the letters that people would write to be published in the back of a Batman comic. This led to 1988's Death in the Family, which is the infamous storyline in which the Joker is a diplomatic ambassador for some Middle Eastern country. I can't remember off the top of my head. And he's got diplomatic immunity because of it. That whole idea is just weird. But the general idea here is that Jason Todd is looking for his mother. And once again, the story has been told differently over the years. They've cut out portions and changed things. Like, I honestly don't remember the last time they brought up that the Joker was a diplomatic ambassador for a Middle Eastern country. Probably because that becomes wildly racist post like 2000. But anyway, what ends up happening is Jason gets word that his mother is alive and wants him to come and see her. He goes out there, discovers it was the Joker, planting the idea that his mother was out there. Some versions have it be the actual mother was out there. I've seen it go both ways. If you go through his history, his origin has been retold like every 2 years and altered to adapt to the current DC landscape. Gets very confusing. But anyway, he goes out there, and as we all know, he gets blown up and beaten with a crowbar, and then Batman can't save him. As a fun side note, you can Google it here on YouTube or go on Google. You can look for an alternate ending to Under the Red Hood, which shows the idea of what if Batman died in the explosion. It's a pretty cool alternate take that they were playing with. Moving on, as we all know, they did a telephone poll for the audience to decide if Jason would die or not. And it was fixed with the people who really hated Jason Todd calling in multiple times. Once again, this is before the internet. We just had a telephone line. You just called up and hit a bot and hit yes, let him die. Yes, let him live. So somebody really hated Jason Todd. They're like, I don't want this little kid around anymore. Well, then we move into Batman is pretty much, distraught. He lost a Robin. And we deal with that for a little while, and then Jason kind of gets forgotten about, and Batman moves on. He goes through an era where he's really edgy. He gets his back broken. He then gets some flamethrowers. It's a whole thing that happens. That's Nightfall. We'll talk about that disaster one day. But anyway, moving forward, we eventually get to Hush. Now, Hush came out in 2003, and they thought it would be fun to tease the idea that Red Hood had returned. Okay, so he kidnaps Tim Drake, brings him to a graveyard. Batman is trying to figure out who Hush is, and they decide that they're going to tease that it's Jason Todd. Turns out it wasn't Jason Todd. It was actually Clayface pretending to be Jason Todd, and that was orchestrated by Hush as a way to manipulate Batman. Then they just forgot about him. Jason Wittick was doing the Batman book at the time, or a Batman book. I'm not really sure if it was mainline Batman or offline Batman, but either way, it was a Batman book. And he wanted to do a big splash. So in 2005, he decided to actually bring back Red Hood. And as he's quoted, I was less interested in the how and the why and what Jason Todd, returning from the dead, was going to do to Batman. You can find the quotes online, but what that basically says is he decided to bring Jason back from the dead and had no idea how that was supposed to happen. We just brought him back as a villain. That's the infamous Under the Red Hood storyline, okay? He shows back up, and he's basically messing with Batman. And the philosophy is, why did you let the Joker live? Why was he allowed to live after he killed me? That was Jason's whole philosophy, which turns him into a villain. And Batman even has a chance at the very end of the storyline to kind of bring Jason back into the fold by letting him kill the Joker. But Batman, of course, saves the Joker, which sends Jason on this, like, you're saving the Joker over me. How dare you? And that's the direction Red Hood goes for a little while. Now, depending on which fan of Red Hood you are, this is the era that you like or hate. So Jason, for this period, already starts with the idea of they don't know what to do with Jason. And that's the problem with Red Hood, which is going to lead to the problem with bringing him into the DCU, because I know a lot of people wanted to move in that direction. But the problem with Jason Todd is they don't know what to do with him after his amazing introduction. That's why most of the times we see him in other media, it's just under the Red Hood. Yeah, Red Hood's a villain. We don't really dive into any of his other storylines. So at first, they thought, what if we take the idea of Jason Todd and we have him do that to the rest of the Bat family? So he goes over, steals a Nightwing outfit, and now he's Nightwing with guns. And then he goes over and he steals a Red Robin outfit, and now he's Red Robin with guns. And he's just like a more vicious version of the other heroes in the Bat family. That wasn't working, so they threw that out almost immediately. We then move over to his big confrontation pre-New 52. Him and Tim Drake had a lot of problems, because at this time, Damian Wayne, while having been introduced, wasn't Robin. It was Tim Drake. So Jason saw Tim Drake as his replacement, which he technically was, but Jason, you died. Anyway, Jason saw Tim Drake as the replacement, so his idea was he hated Tim Drake because he took over Jason's role. So what they did for a little while was have Tim Drake versus Jason. Now, the reason why this was going on, and it wasn't just Bruce Wayne versus Jason Todd, is Bruce Wayne was killed. We had Batman R.I.P. and we had Batman Battle for the Cowl. And in both of these, basically Batman is assumed to be dead, as he is pretty much yearly. He's assumed to be dead on a regular basis, because apparently with the Bat family, if Batman goes missing for more than 3 days, they're putting up posters on the sides of like milk cartons and stuff like that. They're like, Batman died! Where's Batman? Anyway, that's kind of what was going on. Tim Drake assumed Batman was dead. Jason's fighting him because he's like, no, I should be taking over. I'm the real Robin. A whole thing happens there. We move into Battle for the Cowl. Now there's a quote for Battle for the Cowl that I actually found interesting doing research to kind of get my thoughts organized for Red Hood. Now, Battle for the Cowl's concept is Batman is officially gone. Who's going to take over the role of Batman? Nightwing doesn't want to be Batman at this time. So he's like, we're going to leave Batman's identity out. I'm Nightwing, you're Red Robin, everyone's doing their own thing. Jason Todd shows up and he's going to be Batman with guns. Like, actually be Batman with guns this time. And he's running around, he's killing mobsters, he's killing villains. His philosophy is, this is how Batman should be. We should be murking every bad guy in the entire world. This leads to Tim Drake donning the cowl to show Jason how Batman should be acting. Jason kicks Tim Drake's buttocks, I gotta be family friendly for YouTube, buttocks across all of Gotham, just destroys him, which leads to Nightwing battling against Jason Todd, and he beats Jason Todd. And then through this, Nightwing becomes Batman. Now, there is a quote from the writer of this storyline, Tony Daniel, in which he said, at this point, Jason is beyond the point of no return in terms of ever being considered even remotely a hero. What I wanted to do here is put him in a place that he can't come back from. The things that he does here in Battle for the Cowl are the things that can never really be forgiven. The only outcome would be imprisonment or something worse. From this point on, Jason, the gray area between good and bad, has disappeared. It's crystal clear that he is on the dark side. So yeah, at this point, Jason has been reintroduced, did a whole entanglement with Batman, had a confusing back and forth with Nightwing and Tim, and now he's fighting against the family. That should be it, right? Jason should be the bad guy and just be the bad guy against Batman. But here's the problem. Jason's popular. Like, the idea of a Robin coming back and being an evil Batman is popular. So they kind of went down this path a little bit, but this is where things get kind of dumb. The Bat family has the overall idea throughout all of these events, Jason can be redeemed. we move on to an era that most Red Hood fans love to forget about. It's called A Revenge of the Red Hood. And Jason makes like a pseudo superhero suit, pseudo Red Hood suit, and he gets this like crazy woman named Scarlet as a sidekick. And his idea is that I'm gonna be the Batman that Batman should be. During this period, we have other superheroes who are back. Batman and Robin, and then Jason and Scarlet end up having a back and forth with Batman. During this period, Jason is portrayed to be a lot weaker. He loses to the villain Flamingo. Scarlet is also beaten by Flamingo. They're constantly always on a downward spiral. This leads to Jason being put in Arkham Asylum, but he's like, no, I'm not insane. Put me in Gen Pop. So he goes to general population, where he murders, and I found this one on the wiki, but I didn't have an exact number. He kills 82 inmates and convinces others to commit suicide. This leads to Jason getting broken out by a group of mercs led by Scarlet, and Tim just letting him go and being like, one day he'll be redeemable and come back to the Bat family. Like, the problem with Jason Todd is you cannot have a villain against Batman like this, that the family is cool with letting go. This is different than not killing the Joker. This is literally being like, Joker, see you next week? Try to kill less than 10. Like, it just doesn't work. He's irredeemable at this point. But don't worry, the New 52 happened. So the New 52 came out in 2011, and the general idea was this is going to be a jumping on point for everybody. You can grab all the brand new number ones and learn all you want about your favorite superheroes and stuff like that. Well, Red Hood's popularity was rising. They wanted to start to use him more. But how do you use an irredeemable supervillain as a hero and give him his own book? Well, you don't make him a villain anymore. So in Red Hood and the Outlaws number 1 through like 12 or whatever, it was kind of established. They didn't say what Jason had done between things, because that was the problem with New 52. Some stuff was still in continuity and some stuff wasn't. But what they did was, first off, cleaned up his convoluted backstory. So I didn't go into it, but the way that Jason actually came back, and this is what's decided later after he came back for Under the Red Hood, the way he actually came back was Superboy Prime in one of the Crisis punched reality. This reality punch altered things that DC just wanted to bring back without a proper explanation. Jason Todd woke up in the coffin in the ground and using his bare hands broke out and climbed out of his own grave. He then walked however many miles to the nearest hospital with his head still split open by the Joker. Like, they left his injuries intact. He then passed out and was unconscious for a year. Talia al Ghul in the League of Assassins found him and decided that they were going to revive him to create a problem for Batman. Does that not sound like the plot to Damian? Because it is. Anyway, Talia al Ghul just likes to just stick weird things in Batman's life. Here's your revived Robin. Here's your son. Also, I'm gonna take over the entire city of Gotham. Are you confused yet, Bruce? I love ya. She was all over the place. Anyway, Jason then became Red Hood, and that was the plot they went with. Well, they realized in New 52, you now have to explain a reality-altering punch by a Superboy that doesn't exist. So they got rid of that. What they decided to do with the new origin is that Jason was dug up by Talia in the League of Assassins, then brought to the Lazarus Pit, where he was revived and then trained, and then sent back to Batman. I'm a little unclear on this, honestly, if they sent him back or he chose to go back. But it was one, either way, he ends up back at Batman. Boom, Under the Red Hood happened. Jason's origin happens. But the New 52 then acts like nothing else happened after Under the Red Hood. So basically, Jason showed up, caused a bunch of problems, didn't kill the Joker, set off a bunch of bombs. No one apparently got hurt, and Jason's now just on the Outlaws, okay? So what they did with this storyline was they wanted to lump him with other people to give him like his own team. So, and that's kind of where he's been at for a little while now. So Jason, for this particular iteration, had Red Hood with his trucker cap that everyone hates except me, apparently. Come on, it's unique, okay? I get it. It doesn't work at all. It's kind of dumb, looks goofy, but it's unique, all right? He stood out. Anyway, I get it. You all hate the trucker hat. But they also had, I don't know how to word this, but like, I just want to sleep with everybody Starfire. So before Teen Titans Go got to its popularity that it's at now, the idea was that Starfire would be skimpily dressed and that Starfire wouldn't understand a monogamous relationship. And so Starfire, because it just felt good, slept with everybody that she could be with. So the entire concept of Red Hood and the Outlaws at the launch of it was both Jason and Red Hood like Starfire, and she's sleeping with both of them. And they're gonna have like this weird triangle romance thing. But also on the middle of all of that, we're gonna deal with normal normal Red Hood and the Outlaws stuff. Drama! That's kind of how it was going down for a little while. Jason eventually comes back to Gotham for the Death of the Family event, because this is where, once again, the problem with Red Hood came in. They didn't know what to do with him. It was decided that Jason was going to be a part of Batman events because he's a member of the Bat family. So he would show up, like in the Death of the Family event, be a part of it. A lot of times, not really though. It'd be like, I've come back to Gotham to fight against the Joker. They're over there doing it, but I'm going to have my own adventure with the Joker, but it's in Gotham, so it ties in. You got it? It's a tie-in. I just won't team up with them. That's kind of how his behavior with the Bat family at this point was being treated. I don't even think they knew he was there until the end of the event, because the way that event had to work out is Joker kidnaps every Robin, and I think they didn't know he was in Gotham until Joker got his hands on him. Like, I think that's how it went. Anyway, I'm a little vague on that overall storyline. But then we come back and they still don't know what to do with Jason. So using the new origin, they decide that there is a villain known as the Untitled. The Untitled are crazy monsters that are going to fight against the League of Assassins for the Lazarus Pits and other mystical things. The League of Assassins decides that they need a new leader. It can't be Talia. I don't even know if Roz is alive at this point, but it doesn't matter because they decide Jason Todd's going to be the leader of the Assassins. I think at this time, Damian may have been dead because there's that period where Damian was dead from Batman Inc. So that may have been the reason they didn't go to Damian, or they just didn't want to. I can't remember how these lined up timeline-wise. But anyway, Jason and the Outlaws get roped into this League of Assassins Untitled thing. He gets these magical blades he can summon called the All-Cast, and he goes on like a mystical adventure, which really doesn't work with the guy with the guns. And I almost feel like DC kind of thought of that as well, because that lasted about 2 volumes, and then we move on. And I want to state here, not only do we move on, we don't resolve it. It's just a dropped plot line because we need to move back to, oh, we got to do stuff that he would do with guns and he's the evil Batman. Why are we doing mystical stuff? Ignore this. Nobody likes it. Let's go back over here. So then we come back to a plot which involves Princess Coriander, aka Starfire, having to go home, and the Outlaws end up stealing like alien tanks and stuff, and it's a big like battle on her home planet. At least they gave him an arsenal guns and they did their thing. The book, I don't know how it was selling at this point. I was enjoying it, but it didn't have a direction. Literally from New 52, we revamped his origin. He kind of spun his wheels for 2 random adventures. He then turned out, oh, he was going to lead the League of Assassins in a mystical adventure. Oh, now we're going to go into space and fight against aliens for Starfire. And in the middle of all of that, we had to go back to Gotham to deal with Joker. And they ended the book. Like, plots were just left hanging. We then entered an era known as DCU. This was DC deciding that story over continuity, we're just gonna tell fun stories. So they've removed Starfire and they've tried to make her line up better with her Teen Titans Go era. So she got goofier, she had a roommate in Miami, it was a terrible sitcom, the art was amazing. That's all I'm going to say about that, because I think I read about 2 issues and said this is garbage, because they literally made her stupid. She went from just being promiscuous to dumb. Like, she was like, I don't know how humans work. And it's like, you just spent 50 issues with the Outlaws. You know how humans work. You were just in war for your planet. What are you doing over here? Anyway, Red Hood and Arsenal became the book, and it's a very small book. It only made it 12 issues. And the idea was that Red Hood and Arsenal were now going to be superheroes for hire, so that you could call them to do your superhero gig. So Mercenaries, like kind of a concept. Arsenal was the goofy one putting up like billboards for them to get jobs. Jason was the serious one. It was like an odd couple situation. The only interesting plot point that happened here was they teamed up with Joker's daughter and they were going to reform her, which is very reminiscent of his Scarlet sidekick era. So we were kind of going back to that, but with Joker's daughter, who weirdly got popular even though she wasn't Joker's daughter. She had no relation to Joker. She literally, and this is not a joke, found his discarded face and put it on her head. And people liked the artwork enough that DC kept publishing stuff about Joker's daughter until people realized she's nothing. And they stopped buying her book. It's kind of what happened with Punchline in the recent Batman line, where they made a design for Punchline and then Punchline's everywhere. That's kind of what happened with Joker's daughter. By the way, Joker's daughter turned out to be like Dula Dent. I think it was a daughter of Harvey Dent from an alternate universe because they weren't going to use the same universe. And then that turned out to be something else entirely. And then her mind got all kinds of messed up. And then she thought that Red Hood and Arsenal were going to like mess with her and that she wasn't going to live up to them. So they decided they were going to help her. But then she ran off and did her own thing. And that's a whole separate thing. Interesting, but at the same time, not really. That brings us to what a lot of people consider to be the best era of Red Hood and the Outlaws. So we tried Mystical, didn't work. We tried doing random adventures, didn't work. We tried sending him into space, didn't work. Tried making him Luke Cage and Iron Fist. Mercs for Hire, didn't work. And we moved into the DC Rebirth era. So DCU, the idea of story over continuity didn't pan it out at all. They had their lowest sales, I think, in a long time. I haven't really looked too much into it. I'm going to do a whole video on the DCU era and the insanity that was involved in the DCU era, but we'll get back to that. They decided to do DC Rebirth, and this was going to be a return to form. They were going to bring back all the stuff you loved from pre-New 52, and they were going to merge it into the reality of the current situation. The problem is, how do you bring back a super evil Red Hood who killed 83 people and made others commit suicide? You can't do that. And Red Hood was now getting his own fans on the insanity of having no direction that his book was going in at the time. They kept the same author at this time, and in the end, he does wrap this all up nicely. But we go into Red Hood and the Outlaws, the Dark Trinity. So the idea here was that we were going to use Artemis, which was like a discarded Wonder Woman sidekick, and we were going to use Bizarro, which was a discarded Superman villain who had also been butchered in the New 52, and I don't even know where he's at now because they've revamped him like 80 times. It's weird. And they were going to be a different team. And this team came together because Red Hood was chasing down a train that had something on it. Artemis was chasing down the same train, so they ended up teaming up. And what they ended up going after, and they didn't realize it, was a Bizarro, a discarded Bizarro from when Lex Luthor was trying to make Bizarro. Like I said, Bizarro got weird. To make it even weirder, we have this discarded version of Bizarro that Lex Luthor made. We have B-Zero, which is the one that Lex Luthor had working for him. And we have proper Bizarro from the Bizarro universe. So you decide what you want to call that. Now, this book was actually doing pretty well, I think. At least a lot of us enjoyed it. The art was incredible. The story was going in a brand new direction in which the three of them were trying to be the Dark Trinity and do their own thing. And again, DC didn't know what to do with Red Hood. So we started doing a storyline in which Bizarro got smart, and he was getting too smart, and he was making Red Hood and Artemis more effective than the Justice League and Batman. Like, they didn't outright say it, but like he had a floating device that could stay invisible and automatically teleport them anywhere in the world to accomplish goals. It was like this whole thing was going on. And obviously DC didn't know what to do with it because in the middle of this, the story didn't go anywhere. It was like building up for some crazy awesome stuff, and it just got halted because now Red Hood needed to come back to Gotham and kill the Penguin. Now, up to this point, Red Hood had been doing less and less outright murders. He always had a reason to do it. What they did was they basically stated that the Penguin manipulated Jason's father, and that's how Jason's father died. Because he manipulated Jason's father, Jason blamed the death of his father on the Penguin. He showed up and shot him point blank in the face, right through the eye. But don't worry, the Penguin got better. Anyway, that's not even a joke. I think it was like a week later than another issue. He's just in the hospital. Wow, I can't believe I survived that. Like, I can't believe it either, Penguin. This, of course, made Batman furious because Jason killed the Penguin on public television. It turns out Jason was doing all of this to take over the Penguin's territory and then work for Batman on the inside. Where are Artemis and Bizarro? That's a good question, because while Jason was fighting Batman, they got sucked into one of Bizarro's doors and poof, they were gone. And Jason wasn't even hunting them down. He was just like, damn, well, they were fun. Moving on, they go into this bizarre direction with Jason. It's the Outlaw era. And this is when the paintball mask was introduced and everyone was like, what is this? Red Hood is a thing. We didn't mean a physical hood. You don't need a physical hoodie in a paintball mask. Now, I'm not going to lie. The look has grown on me over the years. I kind of like it now. But when that came out, it was like, his name's not literal. They then decided he was going to be the Prince of Gotham's crime. Not a terrible idea for Jason, but it didn't go anywhere. Again, like you can almost feel Scott Liddell wanting to do a direction with this story, in DC being like, no. Let's try making him magical. No, that didn't work. Let's make him the Prince of Crime. People liked him when he was messing with the mobsters. No, that didn't work. Let's make his own version of the Trinity. What if it's like a dark Trinity? You know, Batman with guns, evil Superman, Artemis. She's not evil Wonder Woman. It didn't make that much sense. Okay, so Prince of Crime era lasted 32 to 36. I'm not joking. Like issue 26 to 31 was like, if I remember correctly, he was out in some Midwest town where they're known for their apples. And he had to fight things. And well, that's not working because he was going to be the Batman who travels the country and runs into issues, but that wasn't working. So then they brought him back to Gotham where he's the Prince of Crime from 32 to 36. Okay? That's not working either. So then it's decided the Red Hood and the Outlaws book doesn't know where it's going. So Scott Liddell's allowed to wrap up all of his loose plot threads. Okay? So we go back for like a 10 to 15 issue spread. Artemis and Bizarro come back. Turns out they were in an alternate universe this whole time. They come back with Red Hood. They get wrapped up into the All-Cast and League of Assassins situation. They go through this weird time travel door where they end up meeting their past selves. So now it's Red Hood, Bizarro, and Artemis meet Red Hood, Arsenal, and Starfire. And then they all team up to resolve everything. And it's decided that Bizarro's going to go off on his own to discover who he is. Artemis is going to go off and discover who she is. And of course, Artemis and Starfire end up, in purgatory hell because Starfire goes to Miami and we all know it's purgatory hell. And I think at this point, Arsenal was dead. I think he died in Heroes in Crisis. So he's gone too. I think that was a plot point where Jason's like, I can't tell him he's going to die. It'll break the timeline. And I wish somebody was like, dude, Barry does it every other week. It's fine. Just tell freaking Arsenal so he'll survive. But whatever. And that resolved Red Hood, kind of. He came back to Gotham. He acknowledged that he's learned a lot. He's learned he really shouldn't kill people. I don't know why that was a lesson that took him 10 years to learn, but he really shouldn't kill people, that he should rely on his friends and his family. The Bat family and him can work together, and it felt like closure. They then did a story in Batman Urban Legends. Let me clarify. Up until now, Red Hood had his self-titled book. Then we went to Batman Urban Legends. Not a terrible book because it was a bunch of like B and C tier superheroes in the line of superheroes, but it was the conclusion to Red Hood's story. Why did you not just finish it in Red Hood? Anyway, Red Hood comes back to Gotham. He's now chasing drug dealers down, which eventually ends to him accidentally killing a woman. I forget the exact way it happened, but it really was an accident. He didn't mean to kill her. And he discovered that she had a son, and he reminded him of himself. So he goes on an adventure with Batman where they're trying to stop these drug dealers, and they're both having their different ideologies clashing the whole time. It's written by Chip Zdarsky. It's a great storyline. And then they get to the ending, and Red Hood actually says, you know what? Batman's right. He gives up the guns. It's over. It's all done. Red Hood has gone from the Robin who died. He went through space, magical adventures, his own teams, and he learns at the ending that Batman's method is the correct method, and he gives up the guns, and it's over. And then like a month later, we have Task Force Z, and he's got guns again. I think it was like a year later, but so what happens next is Red Hood, because it's comic books, can't have that ending. He can't have the lesson learned, the guns have been given up. And again, we come to the problem of DC doesn't know what to do with Red Hood. Everything I just told you, he literally has done everything. In the middle of that, just to clarify, he was on the Suicide Squad. I didn't even bring it up because it was like a 3-issue spread, but they tried everything. Okay, like it was him, Artemis, and Bizarro, and the Suicide Squad is over here, and Waller's like, well, I can't trust you to be on your own, so I'm gonna force you to be with me. And they end up beating Waller in the Suicide Squad. But seriously, they tried everything. On top of that, I didn't even touch on the one-shots where he did things that weren't even related to what I told you about. He was all over the place. Moving on. It was like a week or a year. Somewhere in between there, they brought back Red Hood with guns in a book called Task Force Z. It's decided that Red Hood needs to lead a task force of zombies that he can control that are resurrected with the Lazarus resin. That lasts about 12 issues. It's actually a lot of fun, but very convoluted what ends up happening, and we've got all of these stories on the channel. It resolves with the Lazarus resin can no longer be created, but it has been spread out across the city. Now every time that Red Hood has shown up since Task Force Z, and this has only been like 6 months, he's hunting Lazarus resin. That is his point. Or he's hunting Joker. That's another thing going. He's hunting Joker or Lazarus resin. Those are the two things he's doing. He's got no team. He's off on his own. We don't know what they're doing with him. And I don't think DC knows what they're doing with him. That's the problem. Red Hood is just back to being anti-Batman with guns. That's what he's back to being, even though we had proper closure. And it's one of my biggest complaints and one of the things I like about comics. Like, we could have resolved Red Hood at the end of the Blue Hood story. That's what I call it. It's like called Happy Drugs or whatever. Blue Hood was the kid who tried to become his sidekick. It's a great story. It really is. You should check it out. That was done. We could have closed his chapter there. But this is comic books, and we can't do it. And I think that right there is the reason why I don't expect him to be in the movies. Under the Red Hood is the story that everyone knows Red Hood for. You can't really do Under the Red Hood solo without any backstory at all. If you watch the animated movie, which a lot of people do enjoy, look at the amount of hoops they kind of have to jump through to explain Red Hood. Like, they're like, okay, so we got to explain that he was Robin. We got to show that he was a Robin with a lot of problems. We got to show that he was, that he died. And then we got to show that he came, like, that takes up a huge amount of the runtime in that movie. So when there's new DCU where we're going to go to Damian, how do you explain that? You can jump to Red Hood at the very ending and just say he's anti-Batman and a Robin who died, and we just leave it at that. But, like, how do we flesh him out properly? I think the DCU is just going to use Red Hood as a villain. That's all he's going to get used for. Because then all you have to do is, Damian's here, we meet Nightwing, we meet Tim, and then they go, and the other one. And, like, you just get that brooding and the other one. And Damian's like, what do you mean the other one? And they'll be like, the other one. The one that died. And Damian can be like, ooh, a Robin died? And then he shows up and he's like, blam, 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 and then I started blasting. You know, and that's kind of what he'll just do, just show up. That's the only way we can really use Red Hood, because if you look at his comic book run, how do you use any of that? He's on like 5 different teams. He's on the Suicide Squad, his own teams. He's got 2 different teams. He's a full villain. He mass murders. Then he doesn't mass murder. He sets bombs. Then he doesn't set bombs. He's friends with Tim. Then he's murdering Tim. Like, what do you do with that? He's all over the place. And you can't get to that conclusion of him giving up guns without any of that middle ground. You could take out a lot of that. We can take out the all casts. We could probably take out the space adventure. We could probably drop most of the New 52 in all honesty. Like, we could probably just jump the Dark Trinity and just forget New 52 happened. I probably would be best because most of those plot lines didn't go anywhere. You know, let's do Red Hood and Arsenal, then we'll do Dark Trinity. Let's just get rid of New 52. That'll work. And then we can have like a 10-movie spread for Red Hood to explain him. The point I'm getting at is, what do you do with the character? Like, you know, are we just going to recreate Under the Red Hood? That doesn't work. It's not going to work that well in live action because you just got to do so much to jump through hoops and stuff like that. So that's the story of Red Hood and the problem with Red Hood. DC doesn't know what to do with him, and it's very frustrating for Red Hood fans such as myself. If you look at the titles of the videos, I'm trying to clickbait them all over the place. And it's like, Red Hood has zombies! Red Hood fights Batman for the 9th time! Red Hood is gonna go revive his friends from the dead! What is Red Hood doing? Because I don't know. Anyway, if you like this kind of video, like, subscribe, let me know in the comments down below. I hope you guys enjoyed this run through with Red Hood, and I will see you guys on the next video right here at Comicstorian.